Most people hear the word negotiation and immediately think of big conference rooms, business deals, lawyers, real estate contracts, or someone in a suit saying, "That's my final offer." But negotiation is not only for big moments. Negotiation is in the text where your friend asks if you can help them move on Saturday. It is in the conversation with your manager about deadlines. It is in deciding where to eat with your partner. It is in asking for a raise, setting a boundary, buying something used, splitting responsibilities at home, or deciding who does what on a team project. And here's the part most people miss. Negotiation is not about being pushy. It is not about tricking people. It is not about becoming the loudest person in the room. Good negotiation is about noticing what is happening. Because a lot of the time, the other person is making a move. They may not even realize they are doing it. They might anchor the conversation with the first number. They might go silent to make you nervous. They might ask for a little extra at the end. They might present something as, "Take it or leave it." They might start with a huge request, so the smaller request feels reasonable. When you can spot the move, you don't have to react automatically. You can pause. You can ask a better question. You can protect your time, your money, your energy, and your relationships. So in this video, we are going through negotiation tactics you can actually use in normal life. Anchoring, mirroring, tactical silence, the flinch, good cop, bad cop, door in the face, BATNA, the nibble, the ultimatum, and trading instead of just giving. The goal is not to win every conversation. The goal is to give up less by accident. Let's start with one of the most common tactics, anchoring. Anchoring is when someone sets the first number, idea, or expectation, and that first point shapes the rest of the conversation. For example, imagine someone is selling a used bike. You ask how much they want and they say, "I was thinking $600. Even if the bike is really worth $350, that first number pulls your mind upward. Now $450 might start to feel like a bargain, even though it may still be high. That is the power of an anchor. Anchors show up outside money too. Your manager says, "This should only take 2 hours," before you have looked at the task. Now if you say it will take 6 hours, you feel like you're being difficult. A friend says, "We'll just stay for one drink," and suddenly 3 hours later, somehow, that was the starting point. A client says this is a simple project before describing something that is not simple at all. Anchoring works because the first frame becomes the reference point. So what do? First, do not accept the anchor just because it came first. Pause and reset the frame. You can say, "I'm not sure that number reflects the full situation." Or, "Before we talk numbers, let's look at what is actually included." Or, "That timeline sounds optimistic. Let me walk through what would need to happen." If you are the one making an offer, anchoring can help you too. But use it carefully. An aggressive anchor can make people feel manipulated. A thoughtful anchor, supported by reasons, can create clarity. For example, based on the scope, similar work, and the timeline, I'd price this at $2,000. That is different from just throwing out a huge number and hoping the other person panics. The next tactic is mirroring. Mirroring is simple. You repeat the last few important words the other person said, usually as a question. They say, "We need this done by Friday." You say, "By Friday?" They say, "Yes, because the leadership team wants to review it before Monday." Now you have more information. Mirroring works because people naturally want to explain themselves. It slows the conversation down without making it confrontational. At work, someone might say, "This budget is too high." You say, "Too high?" They might respond, "Well, compared to what we spent last quarter." Now you know the real issue is comparison, not necessarily the actual price. At home, someone might say, "You never help with this." Instead of immediately defending yourself, you can say, "Never help with this?" That does not mean you agree. It means you are inviting them to be more specific. Used well, mirroring can turn a tense conversation into a clearer one. But there is one warning. Do not overdo it. If you repeat every sentence like a robot, it feels fake. Use mirroring when you genuinely need more information, or when the conversation is moving too fast. The next tactic is tactical silence. This one is uncomfortable because most of us hate silence. Someone makes a request, gives a price, or says something bold, and we rush to fill the gap. They say, "Can you also handle the slides for tomorrow?" And instead of pausing, you say, "Sure, I guess I can try." They say, "The best I can do is 800. And instead of letting that sit, you say, "Okay, that works." Silence creates pressure. But you can also use silence to avoid giving in too quickly. Imagine someone asks you for something you are not sure about. Instead of answering instantly, take a breath. Let there be a pause. That pause gives your brain time to catch up with your mouth. You can say, "Let me think about that for a second." Then, actually think. Tactical silence is especially useful after you make a request. For example, given the extra responsibilities, I'd like to discuss increasing my salary to reflect the role. Then, stop talking. Do not immediately weaken your own point with, "But I understand if that's not possible," or "Sorry, maybe that's too much," or "We can just forget it." Make your ask, then give the other person room to respond. Silence can be respectful. It can show confidence. It can keep you from negotiating against yourself. The flinch is a visible reaction to an offer or request. Someone says, "This repair will be $1,200. You raise your eyebrows and say, $1,200? That reaction signals that the number feels high. Sometimes people use the flinch on purpose. Sometimes they just naturally react. The reason it works is that many people become uncomfortable when they feel they have shocked or disappointed someone. So they start adjusting. "Oh, well, we might be able to do $1,050. The flinch is common in markets, sales conversations, salary talks, and even daily requests. A coworker says, "Can you take over this entire project by Monday?" You say, "The entire project by Monday?" That is a kind of flinch. You are showing that the request is bigger than they may be admitting. But be careful. A dramatic flinch can feel disrespectful. If someone gives you a price and you act like they insulted your family, you may damage trust. A better version is calm surprise. That's higher than I expected." Or, "That's a much tighter timeline than I had in mind." Or, "That is a bigger ask than I can agree to right away." The flinch gives you a chance to slow the conversation and invite movement. Next is good cop, bad cop. This tactic is famous because we see it in movies. One person is tough. The other person seems kind and reasonable. The good cop makes their offer feel like relief compared to the bad cop. In real life, it might sound like this: "I'd love to approve this, but finance will never go for that." Or, "My boss is being strict about the budget, but I'm trying to help you." Or, in a family situation, "I'm okay with it, but your mother will be upset." The move is this: the person shifts pressure onto someone else, so their position feels less negotiable. Sometimes this is real. Maybe finance really does have limits. Maybe a manager really does need approval. But sometimes it is used to make you accept less without speaking to the real decision maker. So how do you respond? Stay calm and bring the conversation back to the actual issue. You can say, "I understand there are other stakeholders. What would they need to see to approve this?" Or, "Can we bring them into the conversation?" Or, "What flexibility do you have on your side?" The key is not to attack the person. Do not say, "You're doing good cop, bad cop on me." Just ask questions that reveal where the real authority is. If they have no flexibility, you need to know that. If they do have flexibility but are hiding behind someone else, your questions will make that clearer. Now let's look at door in the face. Door in the face is when someone starts with a large request, expecting you to reject it, and then follows with a smaller request that feels more reasonable. For example, a friend says, "Can you watch my dog for 2 weeks?" You say no. Then they say, "Okay, could you just watch him this weekend?" Suddenly, the weekend feels small compared to 2 weeks. At work, someone says, "Can you lead the whole campaign?" They say, "Could you at least take the reporting section?" That might be reasonable, or it might be the thing they wanted all along. This tactic works because of contrast. After rejecting a big request, people often feel pressure to say yes to a smaller one. The response is to judge the second request on its own. Do not ask, is this smaller than the first request? Ask, does this work for me? You can say, I can't do the weekend either, but I can stop by once on Saturday. Or, I can't take ownership of reporting, but I can send you the numbers I already have. You are allowed to reject both the big ask and the smaller ask. A smaller burden is still a burden. Next is BATNA. BATNA stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. That sounds formal, but the idea is simple. What will you do if this deal, request, or conversation does not work out? Your BATNA is your backup plan. If you're negotiating a job offer, your BATNA might be staying at your current job, accepting another offer, freelancing, or continuing your search. If you're discussing rent, your BATNA might be another apartment you can move into. If you're deciding plans with friends, your BATNA might be staying home, joining later, or making separate plans. Your BATNA matters because the better your alternative, the less desperate you are. Without a BATNA, every offer feels like the only offer. That's when people accept bad terms. Before any important negotiation, ask yourself, what happens if I say no? If the answer is, I have no idea, then you're not ready yet. You don't always need a perfect alternative, but you do need a realistic one. And sometimes the best negotiation move is not something you say in the room. It's improving your options before the conversation happens. Apply for more jobs before negotiating an offer. Get multiple quotes before hiring someone. Check your calendar before agreeing to a deadline. Talk to other vendors before accepting one price. The person with more options usually has more calm. And calm is power. Next tactic, the nibble. The nibble happens near the end of a negotiation, after the main agreement is almost done. One person asks for a small extra thing because they know you're already mentally committed. You agree on the price of a used couch. Then the buyer says, could you deliver it too? You agree to help with a project. Then your coworker says, can you also make the final deck? You agree to a freelance job. Then the client says, could you include one more revision? It should be quick. The nibble works because people don't want to reopen the whole conversation. They think, fine, it's just one small thing. But small things add up. The response is not always to say no. The response is to treat the extra request as part of the deal. You can say, I can include delivery for an extra fee. Or I can add another revision, but that would extend the timeline. Or I can take on the deck if we remove something else from my plate. That last one is important. Do not just give. Trade. Which brings us to one of the most useful everyday negotiation principles. Trade instead of giving. A lot of people think being cooperative means saying yes. But good cooperation is not unlimited giving. If someone asks for more, connect it to something else. You can say, I can do that if we move the deadline. Or, I can lower the price if we reduce the scope. Or, I can help Saturday if you can cover Sunday. Or, I can prioritize this project if we pause the other one. Trading protects the relationship because you are not just refusing, you are showing what would make the request possible. It also teaches people that your time and effort have value. When you give without trading, people may not realize there was a cost. When you trade, the cost becomes visible. This is especially useful at work. If your manager says, can you get this done by tomorrow? You can say, I can prioritize it. Which current task should I push back? That is not rude. That is responsible. Now let's talk about the ultimatum. An ultimatum is when someone says, this or nothing. Take it or leave it. If you don't agree today, the offer is gone. We're doing it my way or I'm out. Sometimes ultimatums are real. Deadlines exist, limits exist, people do have boundaries. But ultimatums can also be used to create panic. When someone gives you an ultimatum, your job is to slow down and test it. You can ask, what happens if we do not decide today? Or is there any flexibility in that deadline? Or are there any other options you would consider? If the ultimatum is real, these questions will reveal the constraint. If it is pressure, these questions may create space. And when you use ultimatums yourself, be careful. Do not use an ultimatum unless you are actually willing to follow through. A fake ultimatum destroys credibility. A real boundary, calmly stated, is different. For example, I can't continue working weekends. I'm happy to discuss priorities during the week, but I won't be available on Saturdays. That is not a threat. That is a boundary. The difference is tone and truth. A threat tries to control the other person. A boundary explains what you will do. They explain, yes, the client meeting got moved up. Now you pause. That is tactical silence. Then you say, that's a tighter timeline than I expected. I can help, but I'd need to move my other deadline or reduce the report scope. Which matters more? That is trading instead of giving. Notice what happened. You did not attack. You did not complain. You do not say, that's not my job. You simply noticed the move, slowed the conversation, and created options. Here is another example. You are buying something secondhand. The seller says, I'm asking $500. That is the anchor. You say, $500? That is a calm flinch. Then silence. They say, I might have some room. You say, I've seen similar ones around $350. I could do $375 today, if that works. Now you have made your own anchor, with a reason and a clear offer. If they say, no, $500 is the lowest, you think about your BATNA. Can you buy another one? Can you wait? Do you actually need this? If your alternative is good, you can walk away calmly. That calm is what keeps you from overpaying. Now one more example. At home. Someone says, you never help clean up. That is not a formal negotiation, but it is still a moment where the conversation can either get worse or get clearer. You could react defensively. That's not true. I helped yesterday. Or you could mirror. Never help clean up? They might say, I mean, after dinner. I feel like I always do it. Now the real issue is clearer. You can say, okay, after dinner cleanup is the issue. I can take dishes tonight and tomorrow. Could you handle laundry? That is trading and problem solving. Negotiation is not only about money. It is about attention, effort, time, respect, and expectations. But here is the most important part of all. Every tactic has a cost if you use it carelessly. Anchoring can become manipulation. Silence can become intimidation. The flinch can become disrespect. Ultimatums can become threats. Door in the face can make people feel played. The nibble can make people stop trusting you. So the point is not to memorize tricks and use them on everyone. The point is to recognize what is happening and respond with intention. A good negotiation should leave both people feeling like the conversation was clear, even if neither person got everything they wanted. And if the relationship matters, trust matters more than squeezing out one extra advantage. So here is a simple rule. Use tactics to create clarity, not confusion. Use them to slow down, not to trap people. Use them to protect your boundaries, not to dominate. Before we wrap up, here are a few practical phrases you can use right away. When someone anchors too aggressively, that number feels outside the range I had in mind. Can we talk through how you got there? When someone gives you a tight deadline, I can prioritize this, but something else will need to move. What should I deprioritize? When someone asks for extra work at the end, I can add that. It would change the scope, so let's adjust the timeline or budget. When someone uses silence on you, I'm going to take a moment to think before I answer. When someone gives an ultimatum, I understand that is your position. Before I respond, are there any other options available? When you need to say no without shutting everything down, I can't do that version, but I can offer this. Those phrases work because they do not panic. They do not attack. They keep the conversation moving. That is what good negotiation looks like in everyday life. It is not a battle. It is not a performance. It is not about becoming difficult. It is about noticing the frame, understanding the pressure, and choosing your response instead of reacting automatically. The next time someone gives you a number, a deadline, a request, or a condition, pause for 1 second. Ask yourself, what move is being made here? Is this an anchor? Is this a nibble? Is this an ultimatum? Is there a trade I should ask for? What is my alternative? That 1 second can change the whole conversation, because once you notice the tactic, you are no longer just inside the negotiation. You can see it, and when you can see it, you have more choice. You can ask better. You can stay calmer. You can give less away by accident. And that is negotiation you can actually use.